The rain didn't just fall, it lacerated. It was a vicious, horizontal assault, driven by a wind that bit through layers of clothing like a rabid dog. Clara Evans hunched deeper into her worn but once reliable winter coat, pulling her shoulders up to her ears, wishing she had an impenetrable force field instead of a flimsy umbrella that threatened to invert with every gust. Her breath plumed in the frigid air, each exhale a weary sigh made visible. Another 12-hour shift bled into the unforgiving darkness of a Tuesday night in late November, the kind of night that made you question every life choice that hadn't led to a beach in Tahiti. Her shift in the overcrowded ER of St. Jude's Hospital had been a relentless gauntlet of flu season casualties, a nasty motorcycle accident, and the usual parade of societal ills masquerading as medical emergencies. Her feet ached, her head throbbed with the ghost of 1,000 unanswered alarms, and her spirit felt as wrung out as a dishcloth. All she craved was the blessed silence of her tiny apartment, a hot bath, and the oblivion of sleep. She usually took the well-lit main street to her car in the staff parking lot, but tonight, the biting wind was a personal affront, pushing her towards the shortcut through the narrow, uninviting parquet that bordered the hospital's back alley. It wasn't much of a park, more a forgotten patch of concrete and skeletal trees clinging to life, fronting a row of perpetually closed-down businesses. The only light here spilled weakly from a distant street lamp, casting long, wavering shadows that danced like specters in the driving rain. As she hurried, head down, battling the elements, a sound cut through the howl of the wind and the drumming rain. It wasn't the usual urban symphony of sirens or distant traffic. This was a human sound, a raw, guttural cry, quickly stifled, then followed by a choked gasp. It sounded like pain and fear. Clara, despite her exhaustion, stopped. Her nurse's instincts, honed by years of late-night emergencies, overrode her fatigue. She squinted into the gloom, her eyes adjusting, trying to pierce the veil of rain. Huddled against the grimy brick wall of what used to be a dry cleaner's, partially obscured by an overflowing dumpster, was a figure. A man. He was soaked to the bone, his clothes plastered to his frame, making him appear impossibly thin. His body shuddered with violent, uncontrolled tremors that weren't just from the cold. As Clara took a hesitant step closer, she heard him again, muttering fragmented words, his voice raspy and hoarse. "Check your six! I'm on it, Sergeant! Incoming! Incoming! Get down! They're coming! They're coming for us!" He was lost in a different battle, one playing out only in his mind. Clara recognized the signs instantly. A severe PTSD episode, triggered by the noise, the chaos, the feeling of being exposed and hunted. The terror in his wide, bloodshot eyes was visceral, unmistakable. It wasn't the vacant stare of intoxication. It was the vivid horror of a nightmare made real. "Hey," Clara said softly, her voice barely audible over the storm, trying to keep her tone calm, non-threatening. "Hey, it's okay. You're safe. You're in the city. No one's coming." He flinched violently at her voice, pressing himself harder against the wall, his eyes darting wildly, searching for unseen threats. His hands, gnarled and raw from exposure, clutched at the air as if grasping for a weapon or a fallen comrade. Clara moved slowly, deliberately, her training kicking in. She knelt a few feet away, making herself smaller, less imposing. "My name's Clara. I'm a nurse. Can you tell me your name?" He didn't answer, just kept whimpering. "Charlie. They're in the wire." As she tried to discern more, her gaze fell upon his forearm. Even in the dim light, even faded and scarred, the tattoo was unmistakable. An eagle, its wings spread wide, clutching a globe and an anchor, the U.S. Marine Corps emblem. A jolt went through Clara. This wasn't just a homeless man, this was a veteran, someone who had served, had seen horrors unimaginable, and was now left to shiver in the unforgiving urban wilderness, forgotten. A wave of profound sadness washed over her, quickly followed by a spark of indignation. Before she could coax another word from him, before she could even properly assess his condition, the piercing beam of headlights cut through the darkness. A police cruiser, its blue and red lights silently strobing the wet pavement, pulled up, stopping abruptly at the edge of the parquet. Officer Holt, a man whose weary face Clara recognized from numerous ER admissions of rowdy Saturday nights, stepped out. He was a stocky man in his late 40s, his uniform impeccable despite the driving rain, though his expression was permanently etched with a mixture of cynicism and annoyance. He took one look at the scene, the huddled man, Clara kneeling beside him and sighed, a sound of profound exasperation that carried even over the wind. "All right, buddy, let's go. Move along. You know the drill." His voice was flat, devoid of empathy, used to giving orders to people he considered a nuisance. Clara stood up, putting herself between Holt and the veteran. "Officer, wait. He's not just moving along. He's having a medical emergency. He's experiencing a severe PTSD episode and is severely hypothermic." Holt scoffed, his eyes rolling heavenward. "Oh, sure he is. Another one. They all got something, don't they, nurse? Just clear out." "Public intoxication. Disturbing the peace. I got a call. Gotta deal with it. Don't need you adding to the drama." He gestured vaguely down the alley. "Get him out of here or I'm taking him to detox." "He's a Marine officer," Clara pleaded, pointing to the faded tattoo. "He's a veteran. He needs help, not a jail cell." "Everybody's a veteran when they're trying to get out of trouble," Holt retorted, his patience clearly wearing thin. He took a step forward, his hand resting conspicuously on his utility belt. "Look, I appreciate your bleeding heart, but this isn't your jurisdiction. This man is a public nuisance. Now, are you going to step aside, or am I going to have to ask you again?" The veteran, whom Clara now internally named Sully based on the fragments she'd heard, whimpered again, curling into an even tighter ball. The humiliation of being treated like an animal, a problem to be shooed away, was palpable even amidst his delirium. Just then, the beam of a phone flashlight flickered. A young man with a cocky grin, holding his smartphone aloft, emerged from the shadows of a nearby doorway. He'd clearly been drawn by the police lights and the escalating confrontation. "Whoa, check it out, drama," he muttered, aiming his phone's camera squarely at the scene. "Nurse having a meltdown over a hobo? This is going viral." His snickering laughter was shrill and ugly in the desolate night. Rage, cold and sharp, ignited in Clara's chest. Not at the officer, not yet, but at the casual cruelty of the bystander, at the casual dismissal of a human being suffering, at the way society had chewed up and spat out someone who had given so much. She looked at Sully, shivering uncontrollably, his eyes wide with fear and a profound, bone-deep exhaustion. He was soaked to the bone, practically transparent with cold, and this officer wanted to throw him into a drunk tank? Without a moment's hesitation, a decision formed, impulsive and absolute. She unzipped her own heavy, insulated winter coat, the one her mother had given her last Christmas, the one thing keeping the worst of the cold at bay. The frigid air hit her instantly, making her gasp, but she ignored it. "He needs warmth," she declared, her voice firm, cutting through the wind and the officer's bluster. She stepped forward, her body now a deliberate shield between Sully and Officer Holt, between Sully and the dehumanizing glare of the phone's camera. With a gentle but determined movement, she draped her thick, warm coat over Sully's trembling shoulders, pulling it around him like a protective cocoon. The contrast was immediate. The dark fabric, still radiating her body heat, was a sudden, blessed warmth against his icy skin. She pressed it tight, sheltering him not just from the rain, but from the humiliation, the judgmental stares, the harsh world that wanted him gone. She put her hand on his shoulder, a silent promise. "This man is a patient," Clara stated, her voice now carrying the authority of her profession, the indignation a sharp edge beneath her calm tone. "He is actively hypothermic, disoriented, and experiencing acute psychiatric distress. As a registered nurse, I am telling you, officer, he requires immediate medical attention at Street Jude's, not an arrest. You can cite me for obstruction if you want, but you will call an ambulance and have him transported to the ER, or I will personally walk him across that street and file a formal complaint with the chief of police about your gross negligence and dereliction of duty towards a vulnerable citizen." She stared him down, her eyes unwavering. Officer Holt's face contorted, a mixture of surprise, annoyance, and grudging respect. He hadn't expected this kind of resistance, especially not from an exhausted nurse. He glanced at the phone, still filming, then back at Clara's determined face, then down at the Marine, now huddled beneath the bright red coat, a stark contrast to his own misery. He let out another sigh, this one laced with defeat. "Fine," he bit out, pulling out his radio. "Fine, nurse. You win this round, but don't think this ends here." He turned away, speaking into his radio, his voice clipped and resentful. "Yeah, I got a 10 to 54, psych. Male, approximately 40 seconds. Hypothermic. Need an ambulance to the parquet across from Street Jude's ER. And yeah, make it quick. Got a civilian demanding expedited service. He shot Clara a venomous glare before turning his attention back to the bystander. "And you, kid? Turn that damn phone off and move along before I add you to the list of public disturbances." The phone user, realizing the show was over and perhaps sensing a shift in the officer's mood, mumbled something and retreated into the shadows. Clara stayed knelt beside Sully, her own body now shivering from the cold, but a fierce, protective warmth bloomed in her chest. She had shielded him. For a moment, she had been his covenant in the storm. As the distant wail of an approaching ambulance grew louder, she knew this was far from over. But for now, he was safe, cloaked in her coat, in her care. The ambulance bay of Street Jude's was a sterile, brightly lit cavern that offered no comfort from the storm, only a different kind of harshness. The transition from the chaotic darkness of the parquet to the methodical chaos of the ER was jarring. Paramedics, their faces set in masks of professional urgency, wheeled Sully in on a gurney. Clara's coat was still draped over him, a splash of defiant red in a world of clinical blues and whites. She walked alongside, her own clothes now soaked through, shivering not just from the cold but from a surge of adrenaline. Admitting one male, approximate age 40, found unresponsive but conscious, one of the paramedics rattled off to the triage nurse, a woman named Brenda, with tired eyes and hair pulled back so tightly it seemed to pull her face into a permanent frown. Severe hypothermia, signs of disorientation, possible intoxication. Vitals are unstable but holding. BP 90/50, heart rate 110. Brenda's eyes flickered from the paramedic to Sully, then landed on Clara with a distinct lack of warmth. "And who's this?" "I'm Clara Evans, RN. I was on my way home and found him. He needs a full workup, including a psych evaluation. He's a veteran experiencing an acute PTSD episode." Brenda's fingers flew across her keyboard, her expression unchanging. "Does he have ID? Insurance?" "I don't know, he wasn't coherent enough to ask," Clara said, a familiar frustration beginning to bubble. "His name might be John Sullivan. That's not the priority right now. The priority is getting him warm and stabilized." "The priority," Brenda said without looking up from her screen, "is getting him registered so we can treat him. No name, no file. No file, no treatment. That's the protocol." The cold, impersonal word protocol hung in the air. It was a word Clara heard 100 times a shift, a word often used as a shield against the messy, inconvenient realities of human suffering. They were shuffled into a curtained-off bay in the cacophonous main ER. The air smelled of antiseptic, stale coffee, and the faint metallic scent of blood. Machines beeped and whirred in a relentless, arrhythmic symphony. A tech, barely 20, came in to hook Sully up to a monitor while another nurse started fitting him with a bear hugger, a forced air warming blanket that crinkled loudly. Through it all, Sully remained mostly silent, his eyes wide and vacant, the occasional shiver still racking his thin frame. Clara's coat was unceremoniously bundled and dropped onto a plastic chair. 10 minutes later, which felt like an hour, Dr. Ames swept into the bay. He was a sharp, intelligent man, known for his efficiency, which was a hospital-approved euphemism for a complete lack of bedside manner. He glanced at the monitor, then at Sully, then at the chart. "So, what have we got?" he asked, not making eye contact with anyone but the screen. "I think he's a veteran with severe PTSD and hypothermia," Clara interjected before anyone else could speak. "He was having flashbacks, auditory and visual hallucinations." Dr. Ames finally looked at her, his gaze dismissive. "You got all that from a 5-minute roadside diagnosis, did you, Evans? Let's stick to the facts. Unidentified male, smells of alcohol, found outside in the rain. Let's start with a banana bag, run a tox screen, and get his core temperature up. If he's stable in a couple of hours, we can discharge him to a shelter." "Discharge him?" The words hit Clara like a slap. "Doctor, with all due respect, a shelter isn't equipped to handle this. He needs to be admitted for observation. He needs a social worker, a psych consult. We can't just throw him back out there. Did you see his vitals? His pressure is in the tank." "His pressure is low because he's cold and dehydrated," Ames retorted, his tone dripping with condescension. "The IV fluids will handle that. We are an emergency room, not a hotel. We treat the emergency, and the emergency here is hypothermia. Once that's resolved, he no longer qualifies for a bed, especially with the flu packing the halls. Unless you'd like me to kick out the 70-year-old grandmother with pneumonia to make room for him?" The argument was a classic, infuriating deflection. He was painting her compassion as a foolish, emotional misallocation of resources. The rage inside Clara burned hotter. She knew he was wrong. She knew that discharging Sully was tantamount to a death sentence, maybe not tonight, but eventually he would end up back on the streets, more broken than before. "That's not what I'm saying, and you know it," Clara said, her voice low but firm. "I'm saying he qualifies for care based on his psychiatric state, which is a legitimate medical emergency." Dr. Ames finally turned to face her fully, his eyes cold. "Are you a psychiatrist now, Evans? Or are you his attending physician? Because as far as I can tell, you're a nurse who is currently off the clock. So why don't you let me do my job? He gets the fluids and the talk screen." End of discussion. He made a note on the chart and swept out of the bay as quickly as he had entered, leaving a wake of institutional coldness behind him. Clara stood there, fuming and helpless. She watched as a nurse came in and efficiently hung the yellow IV bag, the so-called banana bag, a standard cocktail for alcoholics, not a tailored treatment for a traumatized veteran. They were treating a symptom, not the cause. They were treating his homelessness, not his humanity. Unwilling to accept defeat, Clara did the one thing she knew would escalate the situation. She went to the nurse's station and paged the on-call hospital administrator. It was a bold, risky move, one that would undoubtedly earn her no friends, but she couldn't stand by and watch them fail this man. 15 minutes later, Mr. Davies appeared. He was the physical embodiment of a corporate flowchart, tall, thin, in a perfectly tailored suit that seemed immune to the hospital's inherent messiness. Not a hair was out of place. He carried a tablet computer like a shield and exuded an aura of calm, detached authority. He was the Director of Risk Management, a title that Clara knew meant his primary function was to protect the hospital, not its patients. He beckoned her into a small, glass-walled conference room, his smile thin and utterly devoid of warmth. "Nurse Evans, Dr. Ames informed me you had some concerns about a patient's treatment plan." "I do," Clara said, trying to keep her voice steady. "We have a patient, a veteran in acute psychiatric distress, and the plan is to discharge him as soon as his temperature is normal. It's negligent." Mr. Davies tapped his stylus against his tablet. "Ah yes, the John Doe you brought in. I was just reviewing the incident report. An interesting case." He looked up, his eyes like chips of ice. "Let me be clear about what I see from a risk management perspective. I see a nurse, off the clock, who broke protocol by intervening in a police matter. You then used your credentials to bring an uninsured, undocumented individual into our facility, bypassing standard intake procedures. You have, in the span of 1 hour, exposed this hospital to considerable liability." Clara was stunned. He was twisting her act of compassion into a series of procedural violations. "I was rendering aid. It's my duty as a nurse." "Your duty, Nurse Evans, is to follow the protocols that keep this hospital running and protect it from litigation," Davies said smoothly. "What if this man had become violent? What if he had an infectious disease? You put yourself, Officer Holt, and our staff at risk by acting impulsively." "He was freezing to death," Clara shot back, her voice rising. "He's a Marine who fought for this country." "And we appreciate his service," Davies said, the platitude sounding utterly hollow. "However, St. Jude's is not a VA hospital. We are a private institution with finite resources. We have stabilized the patient's immediate medical condition, which is hypothermia. That is the extent of our legal and ethical obligation. Dr. Ames's treatment plan is perfectly in line with hospital policy regarding uncompensated care for non-critical patients." Uncompensated care. The phrase was so sterile, so brutal. It was the bottom line, the cold, hard math that governed everything. Sully wasn't a hero. He was a financial drain. "So that's it?" Clara asked, incredulous. "We just kick him out? What about our humanity? What about do no harm?" "We are doing no harm," Davies corrected her, his voice still infuriatingly calm. "We are simply declining to provide services for which we will not be compensated and for which we are not a specialized provider. A social worker will give him a list of local shelters upon discharge. We will have fulfilled our duty." He stood up, signaling the end of the conversation. "I appreciate your passion, Nurse Evans, but I suggest you go home and get some rest. Let the professionals on duty handle this. And in the future, please remember the importance of following protocol. It exists for a reason." He walked away, leaving Clara sitting in the glass room, feeling as though the air had been sucked from her lungs. She had fought the system, and the system, in the form of a man in a perfectly pressed suit, had coolly and calmly explained to her that she was not just wrong, but a liability. Defeated, she went to the break room to splash some water on her face. Her hands were shaking with rage. She pulled out her phone, intending to text her sister a furious rant about the injustice of it all. But her screen was lit up with notifications, dozens of them, from social media apps she barely used. A friend had tagged her in a post. Her blood ran cold as she clicked it. There it was, the video. Filmed by the sneering man in the parquet, it was a choppy 20-second clip, expertly edited. It started mid-confrontation, showing her standing over the cowering Sully, shouting at Officer Holt. It cut out her calm explanations, her attempts to de-escalate. It just showed her anger. The caption was a gut punch. Karen nurse has meltdown, harasses homeless man and obstructs police. Street Jude's hospital do better. It had thousands of shares. The comment section was a sewer. She should be fired. Power-tripping psycho. Look at her. Probably drunk or high. Typical nurse. That poor homeless man, he looks terrified of her. She's the one who should be arrested. Someone find out who she is. Street Jude's needs to answer for this. And then, the worst one. Someone had found her old nursing school graduation photo and posted it in the comments. Clara Evans. That's her name. Let's make her famous. Her world tilted on its axis. It wasn't just a professional disagreement anymore. It was a public crucifixion. They had twisted her compassion into a crime, and the anonymous, faceless mob was sharpening its pitchforks. She felt a wave of nausea. She spent the rest of the night in a daze, unable to go home, lurking in the hospital corridors, checking on Sully from a distance. He was sleeping, the warming blanket still on him, the IV dripping steadily into his arm. He looked peaceful for the first time, and it was the only thing that kept her from shattering completely. The call came at 7:30 a.m., just as the morning shift was beginning to fill the halls with fresh energy. It was Mr. Davies' assistant. He wanted to see her in his office. Now, she walked to the administrative wing on legs made of lead. The office was pristine, with a large window overlooking the city. Davies was sitting behind a large mahogany desk, her employee file open in front of him. He didn't ask her to sit. "Well, Clara," he said, using her first name for the first time, a clear power play. "You've had quite a night. You've managed to become a PR nightmare for this hospital in the span of a few hours. The video has been seen by over 100,000 people. Our communications department has been fielding calls all morning." "It's a lie," Clara whispered, her voice hoarse. "It's edited, taken out of context." "Context is irrelevant in the court of public opinion," Davies said flatly. "What is relevant is that your actions, from start to finish, were a direct violation of hospital policy. You engaged in a public confrontation while implicitly representing this institution. You brought a high-risk individual onto our premises, and you aggressively challenged a physician's treatment plan. We cannot tolerate that kind of reckless behavior." He closed her file with a soft, final thud. "Effective immediately. You are on unpaid administrative leave pending a full investigation into your conduct. You will turn in your hospital ID and badge at the security desk. You are not to set foot on hospital property until this investigation is concluded. Is that understood?" The words were clinical, precise, and utterly devastating. She had been excised from the place she'd dedicated her life to, cast out for doing what she believed was right. "What about the patient?" she asked, her voice trembling. "What about John Sullivan?" Mr. Davies allowed himself another one of his cold, thin smiles. "Mr. Doe?" His core temperature returned to normal around 4 a.m. His blood alcohol level was negligible. He became agitated and signed himself out against medical advice. As far as Street Jude's is concerned, the case is closed. He had been discharged, thrown back out into the cold, probably without her coat, without a plan, without hope. All her fighting, all her sacrifice, had been for nothing. Davies had won. The system had won. Numbly, Clara nodded. She turned and walked out of the office, not looking back. She went to the security desk, handed over the ID badge that bore her smiling face, the badge she had been so proud to receive. The guard took it without a word. She walked out of the hospital's main entrance into the cold, gray morning. The storm had passed, but the world felt colder and crueler than ever before. Her coat was gone. Her patient was gone. Her job was gone. She was alone, publicly shamed, and utterly, profoundly defeated. The walk from the hospital to her third-floor walk-up apartment was a blur. Clara moved on autopilot, her mind a maelstrom of shock, humiliation, and a white-hot, directionless anger. Each step on the pavement echoed Mr. Davies's clinical, devastating words. Unpaid administrative leave, PR, nightmare. The case is closed. Her apartment, usually a sanctuary of calm after the chaos of the ER, felt like a cage. The silence was deafening, amplifying the hateful chorus replaying in her head. She dropped her keys on the small entryway table and slumped onto her couch, the springs groaning in protest. Her phone, which she'd tossed onto a cushion, buzzed incessantly, a venomous little rectangle of light and noise. Each vibration was a fresh wave of public condemnation, another notification from a stranger gleefully tearing her apart. For an hour, she let herself drown in it. She scrolled through the comments, a morbid form of self-flagellation. They called her a monster, a bully, a disgrace to her profession. People who had never met her, who had no concept of the cold, the rain, or the terror in Sully's eyes, were confidently passing judgment. They dissected her appearance from the grainy video, analyzed her tone, and declared her guilty. The injustice of it was a physical weight, pressing down on her chest, making it hard to breathe. This was what happened when you tried to do the right thing. The world didn't reward compassion. It twisted it into a spectacle for public consumption and then punished you for it. Despair was a thick, syrupy thing, threatening to pull her under. She could just turn off her phone, curl up under a blanket, and let the world fade away. She could wait for the hospital's investigation to run its course, which she knew was just a formality before they quietly fired her. She could give up, but as she stared at the cracked ceiling, the image of Sully kept resurfacing. She saw his eyes, wide with a horror she couldn't fathom. She felt the violent tremor of his body as she draped her coat over him. She remembered his hoarse whispers of a battle long past but never over. Mr. Davies had said the case was closed. The hospital had washed its hands of him. The police saw him as a nuisance. The world had forgotten him. If she gave up, who was left? Who would even know to look for him? The anger began to change, to solidify. It morphed from a helpless, churning rage into something sharp and focused. It became fuel. They could take her job. They could ruin her name. But they couldn't make her forget him. They couldn't erase the responsibility she felt. Her phone buzzed again, but this time, the name on the screen wasn't a notification from a faceless troll. It was a text from Maria, one of the senior nurses on her floor. "Hey, just heard what happened. It's bullshit. All of it. That Davies is a snake and everyone knows it. We saw the video. Anyone with half a brain can see you were trying to help. Don't let them get you down. We've got your back." Tears pricked at Clara's eyes, the first she'd allowed herself to shed. They weren't tears of sadness, but of profound, aching gratitude. It was a single lifeboat in an ocean of hate. We've got your back. It was a small crack of light in the suffocating darkness. That simple message was enough. It was the permission she needed to start fighting back. She wouldn't fight for her job, not yet. She would fight for Sully. She sat up, wiping her eyes, a new resolve hardening her features. She picked up her laptop from the coffee table, blew the dust off the lid, and opened it. The quiet clicks of the keyboard were the first sounds of her counteroffensive. She didn't have the resources of a hospital or a police department, but she had a name or part of one and a Wi-Fi connection. John Sully Sullivan, she typed into the search bar. The results were, as expected, a useless deluge. Thousands of John Sullivans across the country. Boxers, politicians, CEOs, and countless ordinary men. Adding her city's name narrowed it slightly, but not enough. She scrolled through pages of digital ghosts with no connection to the man in the park. She leaned back, frustrated. She needed more. What else did she know? He was a Marine. He was in his 40s. And his trauma was severe, likely from combat. What had he been muttering? Fallujah wasn't one of the words, but the timeline fit. The major battles there were nearly 2 decades ago. A young man who fought there would be in his late 30s or early 40s now. She tried a new search. John Sullivan, Marine Iraq veteran. Still too broad. She needed a unit. She racked her brain, replaying the chaotic moments in the alley. "Charlie, they're in the wire." "I'm on it, Sergeant." Charlie could mean anything. But in a military context, it most often meant Charlie Company. It was a long shot. She started searching for Marine units known for heavy fighting in Iraq and cross-referencing them with local news archives. For an hour, she hit nothing but dead ends. And then, a breakthrough. A digitized article from her local newspaper, the City Chronicle, dated over a decade ago. The headline read, "Local Heroes Return. Marines of the 2/5 honored after grueling tour in Fallujah." Her heart hammered against her ribs. She clicked the link. The article was a standard hometown hero piece, full of quotes from proud parents and a stoic commander. And then she saw it, a grainy black and white group photo. A dozen young men in desert camouflage, their faces a mixture of exhaustion and relief. She scanned the caption, her finger tracing the names printed below. PFC, Ramirez, LCPL, Davis, CPL, John Sully Sullivan. She zoomed in on the face above the name. It was him. The jawline was stronger, the eyes were clear and bright, a confident, almost cocky grin playing on his lips. But it was unquestionably the same man. The ghost of the hero he'd once been, captured in a frozen moment of time. Seeing him like this, proud and whole, made the injustice of his current state feel like a physical wound. The article named his unit, 2nd Battalion, 5th Marines. The Fighting Fifth. It was the key. Armed with this new information, her search became surgical. She typed 2nd Battalion, 5th Marines John Sullivan into the search bar. This time, the results were different. She found unofficial veteran forums, memorial pages for fallen soldiers, and a public-facing Facebook group for the Veterans of the 2/5 Marines. She scrolled through the Facebook group, a digital scrapbook of shared memories and enduring brotherhood. There were photos of reunions, tributes to the fallen, and questions from members trying to track down old friends. And it was there, in a post from 3 years ago, that she found the final, heartbreaking piece of the puzzle. The post was from a man named Tom Patterson, asking, "Anyone heard from Sully? Last I heard he was back home but going through a real rough patch." The replies told the story. One read, "Heard he lost his wife and kid in that wreck while we were still over there on that last tour. He never got over it. Came home a ghost." Another added, "Yeah, saw him about 5 years back. He wasn't doing good. Lost his job, started drinking heavy. The VA was giving him the runaround. Tried to get him to come to a reunion, but he never showed." A third, more recent comment simply said, "He fell off the map. Hope he's okay. We lose too many good men back home." Clara leaned back, the full weight of his tragedy settling upon her. It was a story of unimaginable loss. He hadn't just endured the hell of war. He had suffered a devastating personal loss while deployed, unable to be there, unable to grieve. He had come home not to a support system, but to an empty house and a mind full of ghosts. The system designed to help him, the VA, had failed him. His brothers in arms had lost track of him, and he had spiraled alone into the abyss of trauma, grief, and homelessness. She now knew with absolute certainty that she couldn't let this go. Sully wasn't a liability or a statistic. He was a decorated corporal, a husband, a father, a man who had lost everything in service to his country, only to be abandoned by it. Her path forward was clear. She couldn't fix the VA. She couldn't undo his past, but she could try to reconnect him with the only family he might have left, his fellow Marines. On the Veterans of the 2/5 Marines website, separate from the Facebook group, there was a simple, professional-looking page with a Contact Us link. The email address was generic@25marinesvet.org, but it felt like a direct line to the people who would understand, who would care. It was her last, best hope. Taking a deep breath, she opened a new email. She composed it carefully, deleting and rewriting sentences, ensuring her tone was respectful, urgent, but not hysterical. Subject: urgent, information. Regarding a veteran of the 2/5 CPL, John Sully Sullivan. To whom it may concern, my name is Clara Evans. I am a registered nurse in her city name. I am writing to you today out of extreme concern for a man I believe to be a veteran of your unit, Corporal John Sullivan. Last night, I found him on the street, suffering from severe hypothermia and a debilitating PTSD episode. He was disoriented, but mentioned details that, after some research, led me to believe he is the same John Sullivan from the 2/5 who served in Fallujah. I was able to get him to a hospital, but due to a series of institutional failures, he was discharged this morning back to the streets with no support. His condition is dire, and I am deeply concerned for his safety. I have attached a newspaper article from 2007 that includes his photograph for identification. I know this is an unusual request, but you are my last resort. This man is a hero who has fallen through every crack in the system. He needs his brothers. If there is anyone in your organization who can help locate him or intervene, I implore you to do so. Thank you for your time and for your service. Sincerely, Clara Evans, RN. She attached the screenshot of the newspaper article, her finger hovering over the send button. This was it. A digital message in a bottle, cast out into an ocean of uncertainty. It could be ignored. It could go to a dead inbox. it could be dismissed as the rambling of a crazy woman. Or, just maybe, it would find its way to someone who still lived by the code that Sully had whispered in the rain. A code of brotherhood. A covenant. She clicked, send. The email vanished from her screen. A profound sense of exhaustion washed over her, but it was tinged with something new, a fragile, flickering ember of hope. She had done all she could. Now, all she could do was wait. Sleep, when it finally came, was a shallow, fitful thing, populated by nightmares of falling and faceless online mobs. Clara awoke on her couch with a start, the gray morning light filtering weakly through her blinds. Her neck was stiff, her body ached with a deep, weary tension, and the first conscious thought that surfaced was one of crushing disappointment. She'd spent half the night compulsively refreshing her email, her heart leaping at every spam notification, only to sink again into a pit of anxiety. Nothing. The silence from the Veterans Association was a quiet, damning verdict on her desperate plea. It had been a foolish, naive hope, the last act of a woman who didn't know when she was beaten. The system had won, and her message in a bottle was likely sitting in a junk folder, unread and irrelevant. The morning stretched on in a haze of stale coffee and self-recrimination. She thought about her next steps. Call a lawyer? Start looking for jobs in another city? How do you explain in a job interview that you were suspended for an act of compassion that went viral for all the wrong reasons? The weight of her situation felt immense, a boulder pressing down on her spirit. Her phone, which she'd finally silenced, sat dark and inert on the counter, a dormant viper. The fight had gone out of her, replaced by a dull, aching resignation. She was just starting to contemplate the Herculean effort of taking a shower when a sound from her front door jolted her from her stupor. It wasn't the tentative rap of a delivery person or the cheerful knock of a neighbor. This was a sharp, authoritative series of 3 knocks, knock, knock, knock that resonated through the cheap wood of the door. They were perfectly spaced, impossibly firm, the sound of someone who had never in their life been ignored. Clara's blood ran cold. Her first thought was of the hospital. It was security, coming to deliver her termination papers in person. Or maybe it was a reporter, someone from the online mob who had found her address. She froze, her heart hammering against her ribs. She thought about not answering, about pretending she wasn't home, but the knocks came again, just as firm, just as insistent. They were not going away. Taking a shaky breath, she crept to the door and peered through the peephole. Her view was distorted by the fisheye lens, but she could see a man standing in the hallway. He was tall, in his late 50s, with close-cropped gray hair and a ramrod-straight posture that seemed to defy the cramped, dingy confines of her apartment building's corridor. He wasn't in uniform. He wore a simple, dark blazer and gray trousers, but the clothes hung on him with the precision of a military dress uniform. He stood perfectly still, his hands clasped behind his back, his gaze fixed on her door as if he could see right through it. He exuded an aura of such profound calm and authority that it was more intimidating than any threat. Hesitantly, her hand trembling, she unfastened the deadbolt and opened the door a few inches, leaving the chain on. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. The man's eyes, a sharp, intelligent blue, met hers. They were the eyes of a man who had assessed complex situations under extreme pressure. He didn't seem surprised or annoyed by the chain. He simply acknowledged it and spoke, his voice a calm, steady baritone that carried an implicit weight of command. "Are you Nurse Clara Evans?" "Yes," she said, her throat tight. "Who are you?" "My name is Marcus Thorne," he said. "Your email was forwarded to me a few hours ago. I used to be Corporal Sullivan's commanding officer." He paused for a beat, letting the words sink in. "I'm a retired Major General of the United States Marine Corps." Clara felt the world tilt. A general. A general was standing at her door. It didn't compute. Her mind raced, trying to connect the dots between her desperate, late-night email and this imposing figure in her hallway. "Your email," he continued, his gaze unwavering, "was flagged by the administrator of that network, a gunnery sergeant who served with me. He, in turn, sent it to a few of his contacts. It found its way to me around 0400 this morning. It seems some of us still maintain a chain of command." He gave a slight, almost imperceptible smile. "May I come in, Miss Evans? I'd like to hear the full story from you directly." His request had the force of an order, but it was delivered with a respect that disarmed her. Numbly, she fumbled with the chain lock, her fingers clumsy. She swung the door open. "Of course. Please, come in." He stepped inside, his presence seeming to shrink her small living room. He moved with a quiet economy of motion, his eyes taking in everything without lingering. He was assessing the situation, the environment. He noted her exhaustion, the laptop still open on the coffee table, the silent phone. He saw the battlefield. "Please," she stammered, gesturing to her worn armchair. "Have a seat." He inclined his head but remained standing. "Thank you, but I'm fine. I won't take much of your time." His focus was entirely on her now. "Tell me everything that happened. From the moment you found him. Don't leave anything out." And so, she did. The words tumbled out of her, a torrent of frustration and fear and anger that she had held back for 2 days. She told him about the lashing rain, the sound of Sully's cries, the faded tattoo on his arm. She described Officer Holt's casual cruelty, the sneering bystander with the phone, and the profound, instinctive need she felt to shield him with her coat. As she spoke, the general listened with an unnerving stillness. His expression didn't change, but she could see a hardening in his eyes, a tightening of the muscles along his jawline. She told him about the hospital, about the triage nurse's obsession with paperwork, about Dr. Ames's condescending dismissal of a veteran's trauma, his reduction of a complex human being to a simple case of treat and street. She recounted, almost word for word, her infuriating conversation with Mr. Davies, his voice dripping with the corporate jargon of liability, protocol, and uncompensated care. She told him about the doctored video, the public shaming, and finally, the cold, clinical termination of her career. When she finished, her voice hoarse. The room was thick with a heavy silence. She felt exposed, having laid the whole humiliating affair at the feet of this powerful stranger. She expected a polite platitude, "Thank you for your concern," and a quiet departure. Instead, General Thorne spoke, his voice low and laced with a cold fury that was more terrifying than any shout. "What you have described, Nurse Evans, is a catastrophic failure on every level. A failure of civic duty, of medical ethics, and of basic human decency." He finally met her eyes, and in them she saw a profound, validating respect. "You, a civilian, with no obligation whatsoever, were the only person in that entire chain of events who upheld the covenant we hold sacred. Semper Fidelis. It means always faithful. You were faithful when his own country was not. You should be commended, not punished." The validation was so absolute, so unexpected, that it nearly brought her to her knees. He believed her. He didn't question her motives or her methods. He saw the truth of it. "I need to use your phone, if I may," he said, gesturing not to his own cell phone, but to the landline she kept on a side table. It was a subtle but clear message. This was business that required a secure line, not a mobile device. "I need to make a few calls to correct this situation." "Of course," she breathed. He picked up the receiver and dialed a number from memory. He stood by her window, looking out at the city, his back to her. "Yes, this is Thorne." "Put me through to Chief Miller." "No, I don't care if he's in a meeting. Tell him it's regarding the conduct of one of his officers and the welfare of a decorated Marine. He'll take the call." There was a short pause. "Frank," the general's voice was now pure ice. "Marcus Thorne. I'm calling about an incident that took place 2 nights ago involving your Officer Holt and a homeless veteran." "Yes, I'm quite serious. Your officer not only failed to render appropriate aid but engaged in what I can only describe as a dereliction of duty that is a disgrace to the uniform you and I both once wore. No. I don't want an internal investigation. I want a resolution. I'm sending you the details now. I expect an update on the disciplinary action taken by the end of the day. And Frank, make sure your officers understand who these men are. They are not nuisances. They are our responsibility." He hung up without waiting for a reply. He immediately dialed another number. "Yes, get me the office of Gerald Finney. Yes, the CEO of the St. Jude's Hospital Network. This is Major General Marcus Thorne, retired. It is a matter of utmost urgency regarding the treatment of a U.S. Marine at your primary facility." Another, shorter pause. "Mr. Finney, my name is Thorne. Are you aware that one of your administrators, a Mr. Davies, sanctioned the negligent discharge of a decorated combat veteran suffering from acute PTSD and suspended the only nurse who showed him a shred of dignity? Are you aware that your hospital is currently the subject of a viral video that your staff has completely misinterpreted?" "I see. Well, let me offer you some context. The veteran community is a rather well-connected one. A story about how one of our wounded heroes was treated like garbage and thrown out of your hospital, and how the nurse who helped him was crucified for it. Well, that's a story that tends to get a lot of attention. national attention. He let the threat hang in the air, a guillotine of bad press and donor withdrawal. I believe you have a nurse named Clara Evans on administrative leave. I expect her to be reinstated with a full apology from your Mr. Davies, personally, today. And I expect you to review your protocols regarding vulnerable patients. Am I understood? He hung up again. He took a moment, his shoulders seeming to relax slightly, the cold fury being replaced by focused resolve. He dialed a third and final number. His tone shifted entirely. It was no longer angry, but crisp, efficient, the voice of a commander issuing orders. "Colonel," he said, "it's Thorne. I have a situation. We have a man from the 2/5, Corporal John Sullivan, who's fallen through the cracks. He's on the streets, downtown. Last seen near St. Jude's Hospital." "Yes, that's Sullivan. He needs to be picked up. Immediately. I want him brought to the Shepherd Center for Brain and Spine. Tell them it's on my authority. I'll handle the paperwork and the cost. Get a team. Be discreet. He's likely terrified. I want him treated with dignity. Get it done. Get." He placed the receiver back in its cradle. The silence that followed was profound. In the span of less than 15 minutes, sitting in her cluttered living room, this man had moved mountains. He had shaken the foundations of the city's police department, its largest hospital, and mobilized a private, high-level medical team. He turned to face Clara, his expression softening slightly. "A team is on its way to find Corporal Sullivan. He'll be taken to the best private treatment facility on the East Coast. He will be cared for." He reached into his blazer and pulled out a simple, elegant business card with just his name and a number. "Thank you, Nurse Evans, for everything. If you need anything, or if you do not receive a call from your hospital's CEO within the hour, you call me." He walked to the door, and for the first time, Clara found her voice. "General, why?" He paused at the threshold, looking back at her. "Because men like Corporal Sullivan fought for a country that made a promise to them, a promise to care for them when they came home broken. That promise was broken by nearly everyone he encountered. You, Miss Evans, were the one who kept it. Good day." And with that, he was gone, leaving Clara standing alone in the silence of her apartment, the world irrevocably, seismically changed. Absolutely. It's time to bring this story to its conclusion, tying up the loose ends and delivering the emotional resolution that Clara, Sully, and the reader deserve. For a long time after the general left, Clara simply stood in the middle of her living room, the silence he left behind ringing in her ears. The world felt tilted, reordered. She was adrift in the surreal wake of his visit, unsure what was real and what was a stress-induced hallucination. The only proof he had been there at all was the crisp, heavy business card on her coffee table, his name embossed in simple, elegant lettering. She had just started to think that maybe she had imagined the whole thing when her phone, the same one that had been her tormentor, rang with a jarring shrillness. The caller ID displayed the main switchboard number for St. Jude's Hospital. Her stomach twisted into a knot. She answered, her voice a cautious, "Hello? Clara, Miss Evans. It's Robert Davies." His voice was unrecognizable. The cool, condescending baritone was gone, replaced by a high, strained tenor that bordered on frantic. "I am so glad I was able to reach you. Listen, there has been a truly catastrophic misunderstanding." Clara remained silent, letting him squirm. "I've just come from a conversation with Mr. Finney, our CEO," Davies continued, stammering over his words. "He helped me see the broader context of the situation from the other night. Your passion for patient advocacy is, of course, one of your greatest strengths. My focus on protocol was, in hindsight, perhaps a bit myopic, inflexible. It was the most pathetic, jargon-laden apology she had ever heard, and it was glorious. We would be honored," he practically squeaked, "if you would consider your administrative leave to be over, effective immediately. We would like to offer you your position back, along with a significant raise in recognition of your dedication. And of course, the hospital will issue a full, public apology for the distress this situation and the subsequent online harassment has caused you." Clara walked over to her window, looking down at the street below. She saw the city in a new light. The power structures that had seemed so monolithic and unassailable an hour ago now seemed fragile, subject to the will of determined people. She felt her own power returning. "Thank you for the offer, Mr. Davies," she said, her voice even and calm. She was no longer the frightened, cornered nurse. She was the woman the general had believed in. I'll accept my position back on one condition. Anything? Anything at all? He said quickly. I want to head a new initiative, a patient navigator program for vulnerable and unhoused patients, especially veterans. We need a dedicated advocate, a social worker, who can connect them with resources before they are discharged, ensuring they have a safe place to go and a plan for follow-up care. It's not enough to just treat and treat. We have to close the loop. I want a proposal on Mr. Finney's desk by the end of the week, with my name on it. There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. Yes, Davies finally managed to say. Yes, of course, I will make that happen. Consider it done. Good, Clara said. I'll be in on Monday. She hung up before he could say another word. The rest of the day was a whirlwind. A hospital-wide email announced her immediate reinstatement and the formation of the new Patient Navigator Initiative. A text from Maria exploded with capital letters and celebratory emojis. News began to spread through the hospital grapevine that Officer Holt had been abruptly reassigned from patrol duty to a desk job, pending a mandatory veteran sensitivity and crisis intervention training course. Online, the tide had turned with the force of a tsunami. Veteran-run news sites and blogs had picked up the story, framing it correctly. The headlines now read, Unsung Hero, Nurse Fired for Shielding Homeless Marine in Crisis. The hateful comments on the original video were buried under an avalanche of support for Clara and outrage at the system's failure. Her public crucifixion had become a public coronation. 3 weeks later, Clara drove to an address in the rolling hills outside the city. The Shepherd Center was nothing like a hospital. It looked more like a university campus or a peaceful retreat, with manicured lawns, quiet stone buildings, and large windows that looked out onto a tranquil lake. There was no smell of antiseptic in the air, only pine needles and clean, crisp autumn air. She was there to see Sully. The general's office had called to let her know he was stable and receiving visitors. She was nervous, unsure what to expect or what to say to the man she had only known in the depths of his despair. She found him in a bright, sunlit common room, sitting in an armchair by a window, reading a book. The transformation was breathtaking. He was clean-shaven, his hair was cut, and he wore simple, comfortable clothes. He had put on some weight, losing the gaunt, skeletal look from the alley. But the most significant change was in his eyes. The wild, haunted terror was gone. In its place was a profound sadness. Yes, but also a quiet clarity. He was present. He looked up as she approached, and a flicker of recognition, then a slow, dawning smile spread across his face. He stood up to greet her. "Nurse Evans," he said, his voice softer and clearer than she had ever heard it. "Clara." "Sully," she replied, a genuine smile touching her own lips. "It's John, right?" "John is fine," he said, shaking her hand. His grip was firm. "Please, sit." They sat for a few moments in a comfortable silence before he spoke. "They told me what you did. All of it. After they kicked me out of the hospital." He shook his head, looking out the window. "I don't remember much about that night. Just the cold. And the yelling. It felt like I was back there, in the noise." He turned back to her, his gaze direct and filled with a raw, humbling sincerity. "But I remember the coat. I remember it was warm, and I remember you standing in front of me. For a minute, the noise stopped. It was the first time I'd felt safe in years. The first time I felt like someone saw me, not just a problem on the sidewalk." He swallowed hard, his eyes glistening. "You didn't have to do that. You lost your job because of me. I got it back," Clara said softly. "And it was the right thing to do. I'd do it again." "Well," he said, a tear tracing a path down his cheek. "Thank you. You saved my life." As they sat there, another figure appeared in the doorway. It was General Thorne, dressed in another impeccably tailored civilian suit. He nodded to them both, a warm, paternal smile on his face. "Clara," he said. "I'm glad you could make it. Corporal," he added, his voice full of respect as he looked at John. "General," Sully replied, his back straightening instinctively. "I won't interrupt for long," Thorne said, stepping forward. "I just had something for you, Clara." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a heavy bronze coin, about the size of a silver dollar. It was intricately detailed, with an eagle, globe, and anchor on one side, and the 2/5 Marines insignia on the other. "This is a command coin. It's not a medal or a formal award. It's a tradition. A commander gives it to someone as a personal token of respect for an act of exceptional service or spirit. It's a sign that you are part of the covenant. He pressed the coin into her palm. It was heavy, solid, and cool to the touch. You acted with more honor and fidelity than people who took an oath to do so, the general said, his voice quiet but firm. You reminded me, and a lot of others, what that oath really means. It's not about protocol or budgets. It's about leaving no one behind. Clara looked from the general's earnest face to John's hopeful one, and then down at the coin in her hand. It felt like the weight of her entire journey solidified into a single, tangible object. It was a symbol of the storm, of the coat, of the cold walls of protocol, and of the unyielding power of a single, defiant act of warmth. It was a promise, she realized, cast in bronze, a promise kept.